They were elbow deep in his bottom drawer when I walked back into the office, plastic takeout bag still warm in my hand. 3 compliance officers, all in those ridiculous white gloves like they were searching for anthrax and not a 60-year-old man's granola bars and printer dust. The fluorescent lights overhead made everything feel colder, harder. Malcolm's chair was pushed back at an odd angle, and the drawer that never closed all the way was hanging open like a confession. The room was dead silent, but the tension hit me like static. Something bad was happening, and someone wanted it to look routine. "Hey there," I said, trying not to sound like I was catching a robbery in progress. One of the women looked up, thin-framed glasses, clipboard in hand. "Just a standard desk check," she offered too quickly. Her smile was forced, like someone posing with a grenade. Malcolm didn't flinch, not one damn blink. He walked over like he was entering his own funeral reception. Took his time setting the food down, uncrinkling the napkin. I knew that pace, that deliberate, glacial calm he always carried. The kind that tells you someone's already 5 steps ahead of you, and you just haven't noticed the noose tightening yet. He glanced at the stack of folders now carefully laid out like a surgery tray. Color-coded tabs, signature stamps, post-it flags with initials. His entire brain spread out on that desk. And then I saw it, tucked beneath a routine monthly audit log, half covered by a yellow notepad. Red flag 17, unauthorized access patterns, Q3. A folder no one had ever mentioned before. A folder I had never seen on any of the shared drives or printed lists. And suddenly I knew. This wasn't just a sweep. He gave them a tight-lipped smile, the kind he saved for vendors who tried to upsell him on fiber cables. "Find anything fun?" he asked, voice low, steady, just a touch amused. And that's when one of the agents, some guy with a buzz cut and the posture of a kicked puppy, actually stopped breathing. He was mid-page, reading, eyes wide, jaw slack, like the floor had just opened beneath him, and he hadn't decided whether to scream or keep reading. This wasn't about paperclips. This wasn't about standard checks. This was a hit job. And Malcolm had let it happen. If you're even a little hooked right now, pause and hit that subscribe button. Maybe throw a like on this video. 97% of you never do, but it genuinely keeps stories like this alive and helps the team keep digging deeper. All right, back to it. Malcolm didn't move, didn't offer help. Just unwrapped his sandwich like it was any other Thursday, and gave them the slow, patient look of a man who's already lived through the fallout. The woman with the glasses slowly placed the folder down like it might explode. Then she looked at him. Where did this come from? He didn't answer, didn't need to, because the question wasn't about location. It was about timing, about who knew. About why now? In that frozen second, the air shifted. The calm before wasn't real. This was calm. The dangerous kind. The kind that comes just before everything unravels. The first time I met Alicia, she was standing in the doorway of the break room with a collagen smoothie in one hand and a Bluetooth headset in the other, talking to someone like she'd known them her entire life. Or was about to buy theirs. Blonde ponytail too tight, blazer too sharp, not a wrinkle on her confidence. She introduced herself as the new head of ops, but didn't shake a single hand. Just nodded, scanned the room like it was a Craigslist sofa listing, and moved on. "Fresh meat," someone whispered near the coffee machine. I didn't laugh. I saw something else behind her MBA glow and TED Talk energy, a hunger. The kind that wasn't about building, but replacing. Within a week, she started poking at the structure, said things like, "We're wasting man-hours on these bloated workflows, and legacy systems are a liability, not a tradition." She never named names, but we all knew who she was talking about. Malcolm's work was the spine of the integrity system here. He'd built it before our current CEO even graduated college. His audit trees, his monthly flag reports, the old terminal log routines, none of it flashy, but all of it solid. And Alicia? She didn't care. First, it was minor. She'd reroute reports to go through her new dashboard, some bloated data viz platform with more animation than accuracy. Then she streamlined the audit trail protocol, meaning she gutted it, halved the sample pools, rebranded the process, and started calling it Agile Integrity Mapping. She even brought in an outside firm to consult, which really meant to approve her changes. The irony? That firm had used Malcolm's reporting templates 3 years earlier during a merger. But none of that mattered. I'll never forget the day she got called out. We were in a quarterly strategy call with the CFO. Alicia was presenting her new risk score logic, walking through it like she was unveiling the cure to corporate cancer. And then Malcolm, sitting in the corner with his usual coffee and silence, just quietly leaned forward and said, "Those transaction flags you're referencing, 2 of them were false positives last month. Your model inflates frequency if it skips hourly batch cycles." I swear to God, the room inhaled. Alicia blinked, laughed a little, tried to spin it. "Well, that's something we're already adjusting for in the next release." "No, you're not," he interrupted, still calm. "It's hard-coded. I checked the push logs this morning." Her smile cracked like a windshield hit by gravel. It wasn't about the numbers. Not really. It was about being corrected, publicly, by someone she considered obsolete. After that, the war got quiet, but it got personal. She never raised her voice. She didn't need to. Suddenly, Malcolm was excluded for efficiency. His requests were in backlog, his systems marked as non-core. She stopped inviting him to weekly syncs, put junior staff in charge of reviewing his logs, asked for documentation on tasks he'd owned solo for 8 years. I asked him once gently if it bothered him. He didn't answer for a full minute. Then finally, he said, "I've worked with amateurs before, but this one, she's not just green. She's radioactive." I remember that phrase, because it sounded like a man not nursing bruised pride, but recognizing a threat. That was the moment I realized Malcolm wasn't just surviving her. He was studying her, watching the pattern unfold, and he had already started drawing the map to her downfall. It started with a calendar change. That's how quiet strikes begin. No announcements, no confrontations. Just a missing invite. Malcolm's Thursday risk review, the one he'd led for 11 years, suddenly had a new host. Same time, same room, but now it was labeled Q3 Controls, Streamlined Session, Lead T. Kim. No mention of Malcolm anywhere. He stared at it for a full minute before closing his screen and reaching for his coffee, like nothing happened. But I saw his fingers tighten around the mug, like he was holding back the shake. He didn't say a word, not to me, not to anyone. The next morning, his audit input portal access was revoked, quietly. No ticket, no notice. The help desk flagged it as systems consolidation per leadership. And when he brought it up, Alicia smiled that Botox PR smile and said, "Oh, that's just part of our digital hygiene initiative. You'll be looped back in soon once we document workflows for cross-training." Translation: we're strip mining your brain and then locking the gates. Then came the form. A bland Google Doc link titled Legacy Workflow Documentation Request, Priority 2. Inside, a template asking for step-by-step task breakdowns, relevant passwords, team contacts, fallbacks, and known risks. She didn't even try to dress it up as a promotion, just sent it through with a one-liner. "Please complete by EOD Thursday. Thanks." He printed it, in black and white, annotated it in red pen like it was a student's failed exam, but he never sent it back, not right away. And that's when the whispers started. Jason, one of the junior managers on Alicia's pet projects, cornered me in the stairwell, said it fast, like he regretted it the moment it left his mouth. "She's planning something. Your guy's name came up in a call. She thinks his systems are opaque, unaccountable." Unaccountable. The word made my skin crawl. It was the kind of term that doesn't mean inefficient. It means we can't control him yet. Malcolm didn't respond with panic. He responded with paperwork. I watched him dig out old thumb drives, external backups I hadn't seen in years. He scanned and printed logs, version histories, time-stamped reports, then manually labeled each folder by hand. Date, incident, chain of custody. He wasn't reacting. He was preparing, like a man setting his affairs in order before a storm. The turning point came Tuesday. Alicia walked past his cubicle and gave him the lightest of taps on the partition wall, smiled. "Hey, how's that doc coming? Just want to make sure we're aligned in case we need coverage soon." He looked up, calm, dead calm. "You'll have what you need, but I'd suggest locking down access logs before looping in third parties." She tilted her head. "Why?" "Because if you make a move," he said, "you'll want to know what parts of the house are wired for fire." She didn't get it. Not then. She thought he was bluffing. That was the day he started keeping a duplicate journal. One for work, one for himself. And every time she stripped a tool, revoked access, or rebranded his function into some consultant's slide deck, he logged it. Date, time, action, witness. He wasn't afraid. He was building a forensic record, and the first strike had already landed, not hers. His. Malcolm waited until just after 6 p.m., long enough for the chatter to die down and the usual 5:30 stragglers to disappear. The office always had that haunted hum after hours, fluorescent lights buzzing above half-empty cubicles like flies circling a carcass. He moved differently then, slower, more deliberate, less technician, more surgeon. The folder was already prepared. He'd built it weeks ago when Alicia first cut off his VPN credentials under the guise of network consolidation. He didn't rage, didn't push back. Instead, he pulled from his offline archive the logs she assumed no longer existed. Not just any logs, either. These were from her first month, when she'd rushed the new access credential system live without waiting on QA sign-off. Unauthorized pings, failed endpoint encryptions, elevated permissions granted to accounts that weren't traceable to any registered users. Rookie mistakes. Costly ones. Malcolm had flagged it back then, submitted a soft warning through proper channels, but Alicia's team dismissed it. False positives, they'd said. Lag from the transition period. Then those records were scrubbed, quietly, efficiently, almost like they were never there. But Malcolm knew better. He'd printed a single copy before the purge, on his own hardware, through a disconnected local terminal he kept in his garage. He time-stamped it using the legacy print headers, pre-update formatting. Down to the font, the margins, even the pagination quirks from the old firmware. It looked old because it was old, unaltered, untouched. Now he slid it into a slim red folder marked plainly, Red Flag 17, Unauthorized Access Patterns, Q3. He placed it just beneath a stack of routine vendor invoices and 2 quarterly QA reports, enough camouflage to make it look accidentally buried, but not hidden. It needed to be found, after all. Not handed over. Then came the final step. He wiped any trace of the file from the shared network, personal cloud, and offline archives. No metadata, no duplicate, not even a version control tag. Just the printout. 1 copy, paper and ink, a ghost record. And like every good ghost, it waited in silence. He shut the drawer with a soft click, then turned back to his machine. His fingers moved fast, encrypting 3 independent backup drives stored across separate physical locations. 1 at home, 1 mailed to a cousin out of state, and 1 in a fireproof case bolted beneath his garage floor. Not paranoia, protocol? Because Malcolm understood one thing better than anyone. If she wanted to erase him, she'd need to overwrite the truth. And he had just installed a tripwire. When he left the office that night, he didn't feel satisfaction. He didn't even feel angry. It was something colder, mechanical. He wasn't baiting her because he wanted revenge. He was baiting her because she needed to be caught. And when she took the bait, and she would, he wanted it to look like her idea, her initiative, her hands all over it. He locked his drawer, turned off the light, walked out without looking back, because the next move wouldn't be his. It would be hers. And it would be fatal. It started like any other Tuesday, which made the whole thing feel worse. Rain tapping the windows, the usual stale scent of break room coffee that no one ever cleaned out. I saw Malcolm that morning, calm as always, typing with one hand while stirring his tea with the other. But I could feel it in the air. The silence around him was thicker than usual, tighter, like the office walls knew something we didn't. At 11:47 a.m., a whisper floated from facilities, then another from HR, just murmurs at first. Random check in East Wing. Something about physical file audits. Someone even asked if the fire alarm had triggered last night. It hadn't, but Malcolm heard it all. I watched him lean back slightly, not to rest, but to listen. Head tilted just enough to catch the direction of the voices. He didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. At exactly 12:14 p.m., he stood up, slid on his jacket, grabbed his lunch like always, and said, "Back in an hour." Except he didn't come back in an hour. The clock ticked past 1 p.m., then 1:08, then 1:19. That's when they came. 3 of them, 2 women, 1 man, all with ID badges clipped tight to their lapels, and those pristine white gloves they always wear when they want the search to look sterile. The man, broad-shouldered, hair buzzed short, led the way. I saw him flash his badge to facilities and mutter something about Section 9 authorization. And just like that, they were in. Malcolm's desk wasn't a mess. That's the thing. It looked like every other beige slab in the office. Monitor-centered, a framed picture of a dog that probably wasn't even his, a small tray with labeled pens. But they tore into it like he'd stashed a bomb inside. Top drawer first, then the middle, then the bottom, the one that sticks if you don't pull it right. They were methodical, one catalogued, one searched, one cross-checked with some kind of checklist. It was surgical. But beneath it all, I saw it. Urgency. Not the kind that comes from following protocol, the kind that comes from trying to find something specific. And I knew in that moment, they weren't searching. They were hoping. They were hoping Malcolm had slipped up, that he'd left behind a crack, a shred of non-compliance, a reason to write him off as a relic. Alicia's fingerprints were all over this, even if she hadn't stepped into the room. At 1:36 p.m., the man in gloves opened the third drawer, paused, reached in, and slowly pulled out a red folder, thin, unassuming, but labeled in Malcolm's neat, unmistakable print. Red flag 17, unauthorized access patterns, Q3. I couldn't hear what they said, but I didn't need to. Their body language changed, rigid backs, quick glances between pages. One of the women actually whispered something and looked toward the hallway like someone might be watching. And right then, right in the middle of that sharp, stunned silence, Malcolm walked in. No rush, no surprise. He just stepped inside like nothing was happening, bag of half-eaten lunch in one hand, his thermos in the other. His eyes went straight to the folder in the agent's hand. No flicker of panic, no anger, just that cool, unshaken gaze that made you feel like you'd missed something important. He didn't say much, didn't have to. He just strolled past them, placed his bag gently on his desk, unscrewed the thermos lid, and took a long, slow sip like this was just another Tuesday. Then he looked up, locked eyes with the man holding the folder, and said, almost too casually, "Find anything fun?" I swear the guy's fingers went white around the paper, because the trap had triggered. And Malcolm was already 2 moves into the next game. The woman holding the folder was younger, maybe late 20s, early 30s, but her fingers trembled like she'd touched something radioactive. She peeled it open with the kind of caution you reserve for ancient artifacts or unexploded ordnance. Her eyes scanned the first page, and her lips moved as she read silently to herself. The others stopped everything. No more rifling, no more logging, just the fluorescent hum and the soft rasp of paper against latex gloves. A beat passed, then another. The guy with the clipboard leaned over her shoulder and narrowed his eyes. "Is this from October?" Not a whisper, not a shout, just a confused, quiet question, but I felt it down my spine. Malcolm didn't answer. He didn't even look up. He just unwrapped the last half of his sandwich, brushed a crumb off his slacks, and took a bite like this was exactly what he'd expected to hear. The woman flipped to the second page, and that's when the room changed. Because now they weren't confused. They were afraid. Her brows creased as the logs laid it out in brutal clarity. Alicia's early rollout credentials, her exact login string, her IP trail, her access tier, repeatedly tripped integrity flags in the internal compliance systems. Threshold breaches, audit skips, credential mismatches, all logged, all time-stamped, all right there in monochrome ink, clear as glass. But the worst part? Each entry was preceded by a deletion attempt, a digital scrub. The very thing Alicia had sworn up and down never happened. The guy with the buzz cut stepped back from the desk like it had grown teeth. "This wasn't in the change logs," he muttered, almost to himself. And still, Malcolm said nothing. He was already sitting, facing away slightly, lunch unbothered on his knee. Calm, focused, like someone watching dominoes fall he'd set up months ago. He finally spoke without turning. Timestamp headers are legacy firmware. You won't find a digital version. The woman blinked. So it only exists here? Malcolm nodded once, still chewing. That's the only copy. I assumed any others would have been deleted. It was surgical, the way he said it. Not bitter, not smug, just true. I looked at the compliance officers and saw it, clear as day, the shift, the whole momentum of the room turning on a hinge. They hadn't found evidence of some minor policy slip or harmless legacy quirk. They'd uncovered proof of a cover-up. And not just any cover-up. One tied directly to Alicia's credentials, her rollout, her denials. And they knew, all three of them, right there in that moment, they'd been played. Not by Malcolm, by her. And now they were holding the evidence. The folder dropped slightly in the woman's hands, as if its weight had doubled. The man pulled out his phone and mumbled something about needing to flag this upstairs. I saw him retreat toward the hallway, voice already low, eyes flicking back at Malcolm like he'd seen a ghost. Malcolm never turned, never followed. He reached into his bag, pulled out a small pack of trail mix, tore the top open neatly, and poured some into his hand, as if to punctuate the silence with normalcy. It was chilling, because for the first time in weeks, maybe months, the fear wasn't in his eyes. It was in theirs. The woman from compliance stepped out like the hallway was swallowing her whole. Her walk was stiff, phone pressed so hard to her ear you could see the pink indent from her grip. I couldn't hear her exact words, but her face said plenty. Flushed, then pale, then back to flushed again, like someone riding out the full-body realization that something had gone very, very wrong. Inside the room, no one moved. The two remaining officers didn't speak. They didn't pack up. They just stood there, haunted by the red folder still open on the desk, like a crime scene no one wanted to photograph. Malcolm finally broke the silence. You should tell legal to bring someone with chain of custody clearance. The clipboard guy blinked. We're not accusing... Malcolm turned then. Not fast, just enough to meet his eyes. You're not, but she will. The silence that followed was heavier than any accusation. 39 minutes later, legal arrived. Two of them, corporate counsel types with sleek briefcases and the kind of shoes that don't scuff. They moved quickly, spoke softly, glanced at everything like it might come up in a deposition. One of them asked for the folder. The other started jotting down notes on a legal pad like we were already in a courtroom. And then Alicia walked in, heels clicking like gunshots on tile, tablet tucked under her arm, lanyard swinging. She moved like a storm, confident, decisive, too fast to see the cracks forming at the edge of her own facade. What the hell is going on? She asked the room, eyebrows already arched, tone already framing herself as the victim of some procedural injustice. No one answered. The legal rep just handed her the folder wordlessly. She opened it. Her mouth started to move before her brain caught up, some reflex maybe, to pivot, reframe, dismiss, but her breath caught on the second page. The third hit her harder. Her nostrils flared. I saw it. Recognition. Not of the document, but of the trap. She didn't need to read every line. She'd seen the pattern before, because she was the one who created it. And then Malcolm stood, slowly, deliberately, He adjusted his collar, set his sandwich wrapper aside, and stepped forward, not like an employee defending himself, but like a man giving testimony. "I made a copy," he said. Her head snapped toward him. "Of what?" He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Of the original audit log, before the deletion pattern started. Yours is the only access credential that appears in the tamper window." Alicia laughed. Not a real laugh. One of those hollow, breathless huffs people let out when they know they've been caught and are trying to find a way to delay the fall. "That's absurd. I wasn't even the only one authorized during that cycle." "No," Malcolm said, stepping in just a bit closer. "But you were the only one who accessed the system between the rollback and the scrub. That access flag was buried under a security update you pushed yourself. I left it in the metadata." One of the lawyers scribbled faster. Alicia's eyes darted between them. "This is retaliation. He's trying to undermine—" "I'm not trying," Malcolm said. And for the first time, his voice wasn't calm. It wasn't angry either. It was final. "I'm proving there's a difference." That was the shift. Right there. Alicia had walked in with power, arrogant, polished, absolute. Now she looked like she was trying to remember where she'd misplaced it. Malcolm didn't gloat, didn't lean into it. He just stood there, the folder open between them like a mirror she couldn't look away from. He didn't smile, but everyone in the room could feel it. He had stopped playing defense. They summoned him before the dust even had time to settle. At 4:12 p.m., an HR rep I barely recognized tapped Malcolm on the shoulder with that breathy voice people use when they're afraid of what you already know. "They'd like to speak with you, upstairs, now." No explanation, no emotion, just now. Malcolm stood, straightened his sleeves, and followed her without a word. The rest of us sat frozen. You don't see legal, HR, and the general counsel meet with someone in the same day unless a settlement check's getting cut. Or someone's about to vanish without a goodbye email. The meeting took place in one of the old conference rooms, with no windows, just a long table and beige walls that smelled like printer toner and polished wood. 2 men were already seated, one in a suit, one in a cardigan. Malcolm recognized them both, general counsel and the new VP of compliance. Alicia wasn't there, but her shadow was. The suit started gently, as if they were trying to coax cooperation out of a bomb. "Mr. Graves, we appreciate your professionalism throughout today's situation. We understand the material you provided raises serious procedural questions." Malcolm waited. Let them fidget through their legalese? He didn't speak until they ran out of hedgewords and corporate half-sentences. "I never distributed the file," he said, calm, crisp. "Never emailed it, never uploaded it to any system. That folder sat untouched for 6 months. 1 print copy, no digital trail." They both nodded as if they were grateful for the clarity. The cardigan leaned in slightly. "Still, that file should have been submitted through standard reporting channels. It creates risk for the company if it had been deleted permanently," Malcolm interrupted. "If no one had preserved the record and the SEC came calling in 6 months? Yes, that's exactly why I kept it. Because deleting internal audit logs isn't just risky, it's criminal. Section 802 of Sarbanes-Oxley. I assume your office knows that statute well." Silence. The lawyer in the suit cleared his throat. "This situation is fluid. We're currently conducting a parallel review of all access patterns and security protocols. This may result in leadership changes, But for now, we need discretion. Absolute discretion. No internal discussion. No mention of this outside this room. He slid a confidentiality form across the table, already printed and waiting. Malcolm didn't touch it. Instead, he reached into his satchel, pulled out a sealed manila envelope, and placed it neatly in front of them. "That's the encrypted chain of custody log," he said, voice low but steady. "Device ID, print timestamps, subnet records. I included a notarized affidavit outlining every action I took. If anything happens to me, professionally or otherwise, that goes directly to external counsel and 3 federal oversight contacts. You'll find the list inside." They didn't move, didn't speak. He let it hang, because it wasn't a threat. It was a contingency plan. The suit finally found his voice. "Malcolm, what is it exactly you want from this?" That was the moment, the shift from fear to focus. He leaned back slightly, looked each man in the eye and said, "I want her gone, not demoted, not reassigned, gone. And I want a written confirmation that none of this will be tied to my file or my role." The lawyer in the cardigan swallowed. "That's a significant request?" "No," Malcolm said. "It's a minimum." And he stood, buttoned his jacket, nodded politely. "Take your time, but not too much, because the clock started ticking the moment she lied on record. I just gave you a head start." He walked out before they could respond. Down the hall, past Alicia's office, past the team still pretending to work while their Slack DMs exploded. Back to his desk, where he resumed typing like nothing had changed. But everything had. The office was quiet that Monday, not in the peaceful way, but in that church before a funeral kind of hush, where everyone's pretending not to know what they already know. People spoke in whispers. Eyes darted toward closed doors. Even the air smelled different. Too clean, like something had been scrubbed with urgency. At 9:41 a.m., Alicia walked in like she always did, heels sharp, face carved in confidence. She smiled at the front desk, greeted no one, and headed straight to her office. At 9:53, 2 members of the internal security team walked in behind her. No announcement, no commotion, just black slacks, company pins, and those crisp white gloves. By 10:07, her badge had been revoked. By 10:11, she was gone. No suitcase, no shouting, no grand scene. Just Alicia, sunglasses on, escorted between 2 silent men, carrying a plain envelope that probably held her final paycheck and an NDA that still smelled like panic ink. And the thing was, nobody said a word. No gasps, no questions, just a few emails delayed, a few screens refreshed, and the unspoken understanding that something had detonated in a soundproof room last week, and now the cleanup was in motion. Malcolm never commented. He didn't smirk, didn't gloat, didn't even pause. But the changes came quickly. Access doors that had been restricted suddenly opened for him again. No ticket, no approval trail. His login credentials, once marked as legacy, were quietly elevated back to full administrator level. No one told him he'd been reinstated. But the reports? They started asking for his signature again. The ones he used to push uphill just to get acknowledged were now showing up in leadership packets with bolded highlights and direct requests. Please confirm with M. Graves before submission. The junior staff started looping him into risk calls again. Not as a courtesy, as a requirement. And Alicia's replacement? There wasn't one. They just stopped pretending her dashboards mattered. Malcolm went back to work, same desk, same chair, Same quietly creased shirt and coffee-stained thermos. But there was a new stillness around him, the kind of stillness people associate with people who've seen everything and remembered. And then, on Friday, the final touch. He waited until just past 5:30 p.m., when most of the building had thinned out and the executive floor was empty except for printers humming their last rounds. He walked into the exec copy room, badge scan still worked, and placed a single page face up in tray 2. No folder, no footer, just one line centered in bold red font. Red flag 18, leadership blind spots, Q4 incoming. He didn't wait to see who found it, didn't stick around to explain, because he didn't need a title, didn't need a plaque or a corner office. He had something better, silence that shook foundations, and a blacklist that now had one less name and one more legend.